Hello and welcome to the Drexel interview. I'm your host, Paula Morantz-Cohen, speaking to you from the Drexel University Picture Gallery. Today our guest is the librettist, songwriter, and lyricist, Scheer. Gene wrote the libretto for the opera An American Tragedy, which is one of the few new operas commissioned by the Metropolitan Opera in recent years. He's also written numerous cabaret-style songs for some of the greatest voices of our time. Gene is the author as well of the music and the lyrics of American Anthem, featured in Ken Burns' 2007 documentary, The War. He's currently working on an opera with one of our previous guests, the classical composer Jennifer Higdon, whose music provides the theme music for our show. Gene Scheer, welcome to the Drexel interview.
Thank you very much. Nice being here.
Gene, you have such range and versatility in your music composition. I know you trained originally as a singer, an opera singer.
Right.
Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I started my studies at the Eastman School of Music in Rochester, and I wound up staying there for a bachelor's and my master's. And I had every intention of being an opera singer. That was what I was training to do. And after graduate school, I went off to Europe to try to get work as an opera singer, and I wound up working in musical theater. I had a postgraduate grant to study at the University of the Hochschule in Vienna, which is the conservatory in Vienna. And I studied with a wonderful teacher there named Erich Werber, who was a famous pianist and accompanist. But ultimately what happened is I wound up working in musical theater and I even made a film while I was over there. I starred in a very small budget film that was made over
So you were in Germany?
I was in Austria. This is
Austria.
in Vienna.
Okay.
In Vienna.
For how many years were you there?
Almost 10 years.
And you were doing Cats and Phantom of the Opera?
I didn't do Phantom of the Opera, but I did do Cats, as I say,
Yeah.
30 years and 40 pounds ago.
Okay.
I did...
in German?
In German, yeah. And then I also I did lots of big musicals, Jesus Christ Superstar, Fiddler on the Roof, all of this was in German. I played Tevye auf Deutsch.
That must have been quite an experience.
It was. It's actually a big hit over there, and they love the show. Amazingly enough, I was very surprised.
But you had really wanted to do opera singing, and
right. And I was continuing to study with a classical teacher while I was there, hoping that this was just a temporary diversion in my career path. But what really happened, Paula, was that my voice never really matured into a professional opera singer. I was never able to sort of manage to bridge that gap. Being a professional opera singer is very much like being a professional athlete. You can be very, very good and not quite good enough, and you can sort of make all of the cuts. And I did make a lot of the initial cuts of the apprentice programs and so forth. But when you're actually auditioning out in the real world and they're hiring someone to play the Count in The Marriage of Figaro, they can get the perfect person to play that.
You started as a baritone, is
right.
that right? And then at some point you were told you were a tenor?
I considered being a tenor for a while, and that's usually it's a telltale sign of a problem. It's not necessarily, but it frequently is. You're looking for a reason why it hasn't worked out quite yet. And I had a pivotal moment in my life, actually. I studied with a lot of wonderful teachers, but I studied with this great, great teacher at the end of my, at the time studying, a woman named Pat Mislin. And Renée Fleming, who was a friend of mine, arranged that I could study with Pat. Pat was Renée's teacher in college. And she also taught Stephanie Blythe and Maggie Lattimore, all these wonderful opera singers. She's a great, great teacher. And to be frank, unlike a lot of other teachers, also sort of brutally honest.
And this was when you were back in New York
This was back
City.
in the States, and I was about 36, about 15 years ago. And I had only studied with her for about 6 weeks, and I came in for my lesson. And after, I should preface this by saying that after each lesson, I would sit down at the piano and play a song that I had written, and Pat loved my songs. And so I came in for a lesson after about a month and a half, and Pat said, you know, I can make you better, but not that much better. And she was sort of giving me permission to quit, and she said to me, you know, you write such nice songs, you should be a writer, keep the $100, let's go have coffee. And that's what happened. We went out and had coffee, and I was sort of released from this grind of trying to be something that, quite frankly, I was not. And this is, you've said very nice things about my singing. I can sing, and I am a good singer, but it's, as I said, it's very much like being a professional athlete. You could be a AAA player but not quite make it to the majors. And that's sort of what happened with me with singing.
Was this devastating at first to hear
No,
this
quite the
news?
contrary. Amazingly enough, it was liberating. I feel that I knew in my heart, I've been doing this, I've been studying for 20 years. I knew what was up. I had been trying to be an opera singer and going to the auditions, and it wasn't quite gelling. So it was a very liberating feeling at the time. And in fact, I kept working, because I was working in musical theater, I was working in operetta when I was back in the States. And I continued to do that, but the dream started to change. And as it turns out, it really was a wonderful thing, because I wound up working in a part of the business where I'm getting to work at a very high level with some of the greatest artists in the country. And what I couldn't do as a singer, I'm sort of getting to do in a way that's even more gratifying to me as a writer.
Okay. Well, this circuitous route that you took to become the songwriter and librettist that you are, I take it gave you an insight into music, or the kind of music that you're writing, that you wouldn't have had otherwise. Is that true? That's
absolutely true. And also, I think what I'm bringing to the table for the composers with whom I'm working on all these various operas and such is I do bring a lot of stage experience. I've been on stage for most of my life and for 20 odd years professionally. So I could bring a lot of hands-on experience on how it would be like, what it's like to play a scene, what's required, and how to craft the structure of the piece. Because ultimately, that's what the role of a librettist is to sort of create this the scaffolding that allows the music to be built. Because it is opera. It is first and foremost a musical representation of a story, and the music is the principal thing I think that matters the most. But that said, it's not doable unless the language is there, and even more essentially in opera, that the structure is there. And I think that all of my years working in the theater helps me to provide that for people.
Well, I want to talk about your operas in particular, but before we do, you do write these cabaret-style songs, and often for opera singers. And there is one song, for example, Renée Fleming sings or sang a song at the beginning of a Carnegie Hall a concert of yours entitled "Another New Voice Teacher."
Right.
Obviously an inside joke.
Right.
And something that is based on your experience, and I assume all opera singers. Tell us about that song.
Sure. In fact, it chronicles a lot of the experiences I was just discussing. And Renée called me up and asked if she could sing the song. I said, of course. And but the first lyric of it is the first verse of it is.
Can you sing it?
Oh, sure. Okay. I just found another new voice teacher, and now I'm expecting great things. I'm finding a place, a cavernous space, a spot in my forehead that rings. I just found another new voice teacher, who thinks I have nothing to fear, who believes with his power for 100 an hour, it's certain I'll have a career.
Oh, I love it.
And it goes on for that. Anyway, for Renée, she asked me to actually tailor the song. I had written the song before, but she liked it, and she asked me for this Carnegie Hall concert that she was doing if I would write an introductory verse. So she told me about her. I knew some of her story because we've been friends for a long time. But so I actually wrote an introductory verse, and I don't remember all that,
okay,
unfortunately.
I won't ask you to sing that.
But so it was tailored for
Well,
Renée.
I was going to ask you this. Some of these songs, do you actually write them for, you've written people who have sung your songs, Denise Graves, Nathan Gunn, Renée Fleming. Do you ever write for them, or do you ever write a song and think that would be great for Denise, or that would be great for Renée?
I think most of the songs that I've written are songs that I have not written specifically for a person, but then just as you cited, I think that this would be a good song for that person. But there are events in which I'm actually commissioned to write a particular song. Renée, for example, when she got an honorary doctorate from Juilliard, she spoke to the students, and then she concluded her remarks with a song that I wrote for her for that event. It was an occasional song, and it was great fun. So it was sort of a riff on Anti-Musik, which is a famous Schubert song. And that's one that comes to mind. But I have written songs specifically for Nathan And I have written songs for Denise, without question. But most of the songs I've written are just songs that just came up with. In fact, I will say this, one thing that's changed in my life, Paula, is I'm so busy with libretto writing and luckily with writing on commissioned works at the moment, that sitting down and writing songs is something that, except if they're song cycles or stuff that I'm working on, that hasn't happened in a while, and I like to come back to it because, particularly this lighter fare, it's really fun.
Well, I do want to talk about your opera libretti. You've written 2 operas with Tobias Picker. One, Thérèse Raquin, based on the Émile Zola novel, and The American Tragedy, based on the Theodore Dreiser novel. So they're both based on these big novels.
Right.
And I wonder, that must be a daunting sort of enterprise.
It is. I mean, and particularly with An American Tragedy, it was a very daunting undertaking. With Thérèse, it was an unusual circumstance because it was my first major opera libretto, and Tobias was sort of taking a risk, and I really, I so appreciated, certainly at the time and certainly since, that he was taking a risk on working with me. In fact, honestly, I wrote the first third of that libretto on spec because I had to sort of prove myself as I was working on it.
That was your first libretto?
It was my first. I had written other things, but this was for a major opera company with a major production. So, but when it came to An American Tragedy for the Met, and Tobias wanted to do American Tragedy, he chose the subject. It was a novel that his father loved, and he was always talked about in his house growing up. And it seemed like a good idea to me. It's very operatic. Certainly, major events take place in dramatic events, and it's about serious themes that I think would work well for opera. But it was daunting, and in fact, I will say, since the Met production, we've reconsidered some of the choices made, and I think at the time when I was working on it, I really wanted to represent the scope of the novel. And I remember seeing A Place in the Sun, the George Stevens film, which is wonderful.
With Elizabeth Taylor.
With Elizabeth Taylor and Montgomery Clift and all. And of course, they start on page 370 of the novel. They just cut off the first, the first book of the novel. And I thought, well, that's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to, represent sort of this journey that Clyde Griffiths takes. I think George Stevens was probably right, and we've in revisiting it. It's going to be done in California later this year. I'm very excited to see it because I think the music is so strong and the story is quite strong. But we will a lot of the backstory the introductory. We have changed it. Yeah.
Really? Well, yeah. I should say to our viewers that I saw the debut at the Met. It was extraordinary.
Thank you.
And it was wonderful, and it got very good reviews, especially your libretto. But what was it like at the end to go out on that stage and take a bow at the Met?
It was amazing. It was also, it's just, it was an incredible thrill. It was incredibly gratifying. And also, Nathan Gunn is a very, very good friend of mine. So I was there.
Starred in it.
He starred in it.
Yeah.
And he and his wife are real good pals. And to have done it all together made it particularly wonderful. But I'm very proud of it, and I do think that the score is gorgeous. The second act, I think, just really sails. And,
I thought it was wonderful.
I'm very proud of it.
You have Moby Dick, another opera that you wrote the libretto with Jake Hagee.
Yes.
For the Dallas Opera.
Right, that's coming up. It's a very exciting new project. I've written many pieces with Jake Hagee. He's a fantastic composer, a great colleague. And this piece is going to be premiered at the new Winspear Dallas Opera House. It opens on April 30th, 2010, and it will play through May. The Winspear Opera House is a brand new opera house. I think it might be, hope I'm not making anyone feel bad by this, but I think it might be the most beautiful opera house in America. It is a stunningly beautiful new structure that was built by Foster, the guy who did